Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is October the 9th. This is our AACG meetup, and we have as our guest today Sydney Cash. And so we're thrilled to have him, and to make that introduction is Doug Heller, because it's thanks to Doug Heller at Heler Galleries that we have Sydney here today. Doug, do you want to take it away?
All right, thank you very much, Marilee, and it's really good to see everybody here. Catch up a little bit with some pre-presentation conversation. That was good. Now, Sydney is somebody that I have known and represented for 45 years. And over that long time, I have been continuously impressed with the breadth and depth of his artistic practice. Sydney is not a product of the studio glass movement in the sense of someone who has not ever studied with any of the major figures in the field. His explorations with glass have come from his own curiosity and the breadth of his practice. And that practice includes everything from sculpture to painting to works on paper to performance art to installation art. Lately, he's been experimenting with works on Kleenex tissues and coming up with some really, really interesting results. I think a quote that I have here from all the way back in 1981 from Paul Hollister, who was one of the early observers on the glass scene and used to write extensively for the New York Times and regularly for the New York Times. He wrote, "Cash's sculptures explore glass in what seems to be with incredible ease. This is because in their apparent simplicity, some of the pieces are close to perfection. They stand up to examination besides the best work of glassmakers who are totally involved with and dominated by glass's material. Cash is not a glass blower. He is a user of glass interested in transformation of the material into pure form." And the work that we're focusing on now, and I want to explain a little bit about this exhibition that we've come up with called Shelter, comes from a period of the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s. And it's from two series of his, which were among the most successful. They have gone into the permanent collections of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian Art Museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Museum Art Decorative of the Louvre, as well as the Corning Museum of Glass. And they've really been pieces that have caught the attention of people who were not particularly glass-centric. So the exhibition we have draws on 10 pieces that have selected from Sydney's archive. Many artists, and Tim, I think, would validate this, put pieces aside sometimes. Favorite pieces they're still pondering, and sometimes they will stay in an archive for a long time. Reno does this as well. Bill Morris is known to do this. So Sydney started exploring, and we came up with these two series. And what this exhibition is doing, because we want to tie in with something that demonstrates, our commitment to trying to help the problems that are rising to the surface so much now, which is homelessness and food problems. So what we've done is making an offer to all collectors who might be interested in acquiring a piece. If they make a donation to we named two charities that we're involved with, but it can be to a local charity of their choice and preference that represents this type of work with homeless, with food, with children. Any donation up to $500, we will double that in a deduction from the price of the piece. So sort of donation equals discount. It's a D&D program. And all of the pieces in the show, just to do a little business up front, all of the pieces in the show have been priced equally at $5,000. So that would mean if somebody gave $500 to a charity of their choice, they would get a piece for $4,000. And we will cover the shipping expenses of getting the piece to whoever purchases it, anything except whatever relevant sales taxes there are. So that's the outline of what's going on, and that liberates Sydney from having to wander into the business area, and he can just concentrate on the creative part of this. We have an online catalog that's available if anyone comes to our website. It's just www.helergallery.com, and you can find the information from there, or if you contact us. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Sidney Cash.
Thank you, Douglas. I need to do a little bit before I start the show. I'm going to have a PowerPoint presentation. And so let's see. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay. Share a screen. Okay, participant. Can you hear me, Marilee?
Yes, I can.
I think what you need to do is somehow I'm not share screen. I can't see.
I will make you.
Okay,
You
let's
can
see
do
what
anything
happens
you
here.
want to do.
Okay, share screen. Desktop. We just went through this before.
We did. You go to advanced and then part.
Yeah, okay. Now I can do this.
Good.
Advanced security remote. Share screen. Security. Share screen. With screen sharing. Okay. I can't seem to get into advanced on this. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, advanced. Okay, here we go. Portion of screen. Good. Okay, good. Here we go. PowerPoint. Okay, PowerPoint. Slideshow. And then presenter view. Come on.
No.
Yes, I can
I
see.
think we're good. Okay, is everybody on? Can you hear me?
Everybody's on, and I believe everyone can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
I'm muted, so.
Took a little bit. I'm going to take you through a little pathway on what my life was about and how I ended up doing what I did. This is Detroit. I'm 4 years old in 1945. Detroit was the making capital of the world at this point. They were still pumping out tanks and guns and airplanes for the war effort. And afterwards, the car industry was powerful. And there was money all around Detroit. The educational system was brilliant. A year later, we moved to a new house, a duplex, not a duplex, a two-family flat with my aunt and uncle and their boys on the bottom floor, and we were on the top floor. And I lived around the corner from a Bob's Bicycle and Hobby Shop. And I was always fascinated with making, so that became my place where I spent all my money and much of my time. When I was in middle school, I took every manual arts class. I mentioned that term manual arts to somebody who was younger. They wanted to know, what does that mean? And then when I went to high school, I went to an art and science school and I majored in aeronautics. When I was 8 years old, one of the teachers arranged for me to be taking these free classes at the Detroit Institute of Art on Saturday mornings. And my mother and I would take a couple of streetcars down there. In high school, I took a lot of classes in metallurgy and entered Wayne State University in metallurgical engineering. Ended up transferring to physics and finally got a degree in mathematics. What were two important things that happened? One, I got married, had a child, and I started a business. On the left here, this is a casting of an English wood carving. At some point, somebody had a yard sale, and I ended up buying this desk that they had. It had a dozen carvings on it, and I loved it. I bought the desk, took the carvings off, and left the desk. I had this business I was selling to wholesale to stores in Detroit. And when I graduated college, we moved to New York, where I was expecting to be a teacher because I had also teaching credentials. And but I had this business, and that business started in the summer in New York, and I was also taking ornate frames and making mirrors. And this one on the right here and there's a building near Gramercy Park. This is part of the decoration of the architecture. And on a July 4th weekend when nobody was in New York, I kept bringing a ladder over there and making a mold over the original piece and on a couple other pieces, and didn't hurt the piece. And by the end of the weekend, I had my mold made and I started making them for my business. Let's go back one. Oops. Whoops, come on. I ended up having a store in Greenwich Village called Gargoyles, and I became enamored with mirrors, with curved mirrors. And at that point, this was in the late 60s, there were glass bending facilities in New York that I used to go to and buy their seconds. I used to find things to make mirrors out of, like brass casings from nautical instruments, parts of scale, signs, and hat blocks. One day I had this idea to make sandwich boards so that I could walk down the street and reflect people's image at them. I ended up doing that on Fifth Avenue up to Rockefeller Center. It was a heavy sandwich board, so I took a taxi back. The photographs here were from the first Earth Day. If it had been in our current time, I would have called it a performance piece, sent out a press release, but back then it was just something far out. This is another sandwich board where I had convex mirrors, and it was made the day after the Kent State shooting, and I was walking around on the streets of New York with a sign that the mirror made a bullseye, and the sign said, "Will they shoot you next?" This is taken at the American Craft Museum. They had a costume show, and I wore this to that opening. I had become very involved with reflective distorting mirrors, and I ended up getting a studio on White Street in part of what had been the White Street Glass and Mirror Factory. And I started bending sheets of glass and making up ways to do it. I've always been good at inventing technologies of how to do stuff. And there was somebody in Soho that was doing mirroring, so he would mirror them for me. And what ended up happening after doing this for about 9 months, I realized that my overcooked mistakes were more interesting to me. At this point, there were no such things as computer controllers. And I used to wear a kitchen timer on my vest when I would set something in, or sometimes I'd forget about it. I'd be on Canal Street, I'd run back, and there were overcooked things that came out of the oven that when I looked at them at some point, I said, wow, these are really interesting, that I'm able to turn flat glass into a three-dimensional form. These were some pieces that were from an exhibition with an Ivan Karp gallery on West Broadway in Soho. And this was my first exhibition, and this was reviewed in American Craft magazine. Some work was sold. One of the things that happened at this point, I became conscious that I knew how to make things and I loved making things, but I had no idea what it meant to be an artist, or I didn't understand part of that. So I was wondering what I could do. I didn't want to go back to school, but what I ended up doing is I decided that I would draw, and I started drawing every day. I started drawing people on the streets, on the subways. I had a sketchbook. I made thousands and thousands of sketches of people. Sometimes they had to be really quick. This is 5 people on the Lexington Avenue subway. I would often draw the outlines and put color in at the end of the day to a lot of sketches. And some of those body forms started being played with to make bodies. And at this point, I was seeing a chiropractor, and so I was interested in how I could represent the body. If I went to see a performance, I was sketching there. It was fun. There was some kind of energy that would happen at a performance that used to come right into the drawings. This was in my apartment on 2nd Avenue in Murray Hill. And I took the front room and turned it into a drawing studio. At this time, I ended up getting sick. I was losing weight. I was down to 112 pounds. The doctors didn't know what was wrong. And I started hearing this voice that kept saying, "Artist, see thyself." So I ended up after that, at that point, I spent a year doing self-portraits. And at some point during that year, somebody in a meditation group I was in came up to me and he said, "Listen, I think you need to take hydrochloric acid tablets. I don't think you're digesting protein." Well, that did it. That turned the trick. And I immediately was feeling better. I gained weight. And I had this ability to look at pain and suffering. And I was involved with Edgar Cayce work. And one of the things that was said was, if you have a talent, either use it or lose it. And I said, what am I going to do with this ability to look at pain and suffering and give it form? Well, what I ended up doing is I volunteered at a VA hospital on 23rd Street. And I started working in occupational therapy with veterans who oftentimes had serious mental problems. I would draw portraits of them, and then we would talk about how they saw themselves in the images that I drew. And I also got involved with another hospital, Prospect Hospital, a small private hospital in the South Bronx, where I became the artist in residence there. The owner of the hospital and the head director loved what I was doing, and they gave me total access to the hospital. So I was drawing patients, I was drawing kids in pediatrics. I do sketches of them. We'd make copies, they'd have the sketches, and they'd would end up coloring them in and taking them home. And the head surgeon liked my drawings, and so he would position me in a place so that I'd be on the operating room floor near him in mask and gown, and I wouldn't interfere with what he had to do. Sometimes there was blood on my mask and on my gown by the time I get out of there. It was very much a Renaissance experience, and there was something, a sense of gravitas to have access to someplace like this. I also started to have people come to my studio to sit for portraits. Oftentimes they were performers or friends. The people here are all performers. This is David Patrick Kelly from Detroit, somebody I knew. This is Lola Pajulinski, and this is a sketch I did in a play that she was performing in Charles Ludlam's Theater of the Ridiculous. And I can't remember his name, but he was a dancer. And this is a portrait, a commissioned portrait by Brendan Murray in 1977. And just take a look at them because it's interesting. I got another commission from them to do their portrait 3 years ago, and in a much different way. At some point, I had this dream of making a piece of work. This piece of work, a trifold. This is one of the first ones, the trifold that was made. And these are part of the glass over wire, where there would be a triangle of glass, and maybe I can show it here a little. This is an extension of the wire, and then there'd be another wire coming down this way, and another wire would, whoops. A third wire would come down here. A triangle of glass was put over that triangle that the wires formed. As it heated up, the legs would come down, each over the wire. And as they heated up more and more, there was like taffy, touching the bottom, tipping one way, tipping the other way, and creating these very interesting feet. This form called a trifold, I used over many years, and many different kinds of, using them in different kinds of sculpture. This piece on the left is called Love 40. I was a big tennis player at that point. And here, this one is using Flutex along with patterns behind it in a wall-mounted box. I started drilling holes in the glass. This is some interesting, simple bends where this piece of glass was bent over. You can see the line from the wire here. There was one in the middle, and there was another one over there. Because the holes were drilled before, I knew that I had planned to put these rods in on each side, and they became a container, a bowl. And this round form already had holes drilled in it, and I could put the pieces of steel in there and weld it on the bottom and on the top, and then finish it up to become another bowl. This piece is called Diamond Bowl. It's made with a circle of patterned glass over 4 wires, and the 2 wires on this side are woven through what was a hole over here. So this wire would go up, and this wire would go up, and same thing on the other side. So there were 4 wires, each supporting one of those topmost sides. And the form itself, became, was experimented with to see what would work best. This piece won an award for the Felicissimo Design Award, which had as a prize $5,000 and 400 colored pencils. The dollars are all gone, but I still use the pencils. These are some of the pieces that are in the show. And the one on the left here is a triangle over a triangle of wire, but the triangle had holes, 3 holes drilled in it. So it makes another kind of form. This center one is a circle over a triangle. So there's the folds are really lovely that happen because of that. And this one over here is a square of glass over a square of wire. This is another form. And so I want you to pay attention to what's happening visually. You might be a little shocked or surprised. Still keep watching. It'll be worth it. It's an interesting little video. A friend of mine, a cameraman, had access to whoops. I'm gonna start again. This is not something you could see with your eye. It happened so fast, but the camera caught it. There was something very cathartic to doing this. I was the guy who had that piece of steel. For years, I have been protecting all of my work. And it was very meaningful to pick out some, to destroy, and to get a record of it. Whoops. Here's another piece. This one had 16 holes drilled in it. And it was a circle over a square of wire. And so the support came through this hole, and these other 3 holes in between on each side, they were just touching the wires. So they kind of tipped over and they ended up forming the empty space so that they have these supports. There's 16 supports supporting the uppermost cup. This was from an announcement that we had at Heler Gallery, and the opening was on April 1st. So this was when Photoshop was very new, and I had this made so it looked as if a 7-inch sculpture looked like it was 7 feet tall. It was part of it was on the inside of the card. And at this point, these were glass over steel wires. And the glass would form over the wire and pull down by gravity. It was interesting making the forms and using layers of glass. And even here that, whoops, the glass, there were a lot of layers here, and it was heated to the point they all fused together and started melting out of the spaces between the steel. These were done with nichrome wire wrapped and hung into space. Inside my kilns, I had either stainless steel or steel forms. Let me see if there's another one. Okay. So I started working with Flutex. I've always liked pattern glass and had access to it. And it was fun to build with it. I've developed a lot of interesting techniques of what could be made. Whoops. And this was in my bathroom for a long time. As it turns out, there's a 4-inch focal length behind the flutes, and any pattern behind there would be scanned as you moved in front of it. I was very involved with a kind of seeing called unfocused seeing, because each eye would see a different image as you looked at it. This is Broadway windows, New York University's 6-window street gallery. And this is a view from the bus of that show during the day. Wow. I'm gonna, and some of those windows from the Broadway, from New York University's Broadway window shows were installed a couple of years ago at a show that I had at Heler Gallery. It was a show of work from the 80s and 90s that were kinetic, and it was called Pre-Internet. This was a commission. I started working with the patterns on glass. I would silkscreen the patterns onto the glass. The one just before there was a, this is kind of taking over itself. I was commissioned by the Museum of Modern Art. I designed a collection of glass vases using the kind of patterns that I was making at that time. This is a page from their catalog. They were selling both through their catalogs in their design stores, and they sold wholesale also at trade fairs. There were 3 shapes and there were 3 colors. Red isn't on this one. Whoops. This was a commission in Queensboro Plaza Elevated Subway Station. I did 16 10-foot tall windows that are still there. I started doing glass, jewelry. I had made jewelry in college. I had been making jewelry for a long time. I would give things to people. And at some point I started doing it as a business. I would design the pieces. I had people in my studio making work. The black and white work like this would be swoops. The black and white work was sold in MoMA's design store. The colored work was sold in Mad's store. A big brooch with some gold wire and some bracelets and a necklace. I was busy with imagery at that time also, and I started taking sheets of black paper, something called chrome coat, which I love this paper. And I would put forms on it and then spray it with white spray paint, or sometimes a little bit of color. And the way the air went by and the spray from the spray paint went by would make some parts lighter or darker, depending on how the air went around the object that was laid onto the black paper. On the left, This is doing it itself, huh? Okay, on the left, there were rubber bands put on this one. And in the middle, they were pieces of okra. And this one had blocks of wood. And I loved the dimensionality of it. And it felt like these were sculptors' paintings. At one point, I started playing with little characters, and I was very interested in dolls and the interesting characters, from little tiny model railroad people to bigger things. I was cutting them up, putting them into different structures. At this point, this is a box that had 3 different sides. And it's in between, from this point here into the middle of the back is a mirror, and from this point here across the whole back is a mirror. So there's an illusionary space here where there isn't a full ring, and there's only part of the ring from here to here. The rest is reflection. So you can see her get reflected again and again. So there was this side, and then there was a front. And in the back of that orange golden globe, only the front little section is real. The pieces on the side and the fullness of the globe is all illusion. And this little guy, a bar mitzvah boy, was on my bar mitzvah cake. And this piece is called Personal Celebration. And the only thing different with him being on my bar mitzvah cake and here is that this little boy has an erection. And I didn't have that when it was on my cake. This third side has an illusionary architecture. And this was, I was doing some kind of therapy at that point, and just having a really interesting time playing with a kind of surreal, anything's possible freedom. There was a show that Douglas showed this work on Green Street, and there was a show at the National Arts Club of this work. A few of these pieces are in the offices of psychiatrists. I started making light sculptures. The horizontal panels here are glass with mirror that has some kind of pattern cut out, so you can see holes of light that come through the pattern and a reflection of the mirror with holes in it where the light's coming through to the bottom. Here was some drawings that I had applied to glass mirror. I developed techniques of making these. I got really good at it. It was great. And the one, this one I started using copper mirror. So I love the warmth of the copper. I used it with both silver mirror and copper mirror. These pieces are all about 3.5 feet tall. This was an installation at the Falcon, a music and art venue. And I was interested in working larger, and I built this on the back of the stage. We had 3 banks of light, and it turned out that each bank was attached to a slide where you could control the intensity of the light. And I started using those slides to play the light along with the performer. And the owners of the club and I would take turns doing that. And it was really wonderful. People loved it. The performers enjoyed it. And there were people who would be there a lot, so they got to see it develop. I used to go into that place, I'd have an idea and I would change it. And then this was over a period of 5 months. And so it got changed a lot. And it really was a very exciting project for me. This is an installation at the Orlando Art Museum at a show that was down there maybe 4 or 5 years ago, glasswork. And this was from last year at the Marriott Hotel in Grand Rapids, a piece that was commissioned for their lobby. This is that black paper again. I was making narcissistic shells. I was putting lacquer, white paint in a baggie, cutting off the tip, and just moving my hands to make these forms, and then working with them afterwards. The narcissistic shell are a psychological protective idea and concept that we develop as when we're young to protect ourselves from life and stuff. Again, using that same kind of chrome coat paper, only this is red, covered with black oil paint. And I've made these comb type objects that I'm pulling pattern with it. And these are mounted onto sheet aluminum. And here the white oil paint is on the black chrome coat paper over sheet aluminum forms that I made. And you can get a scale with that's an assistant. Using those patterns and that way of doing it, I started working with historical portraits and called my remastered portraits. And these were very exciting. It gave them a more contemporary feel in some way, brought them out of this history into something more contemporary. And I also started to use contemporary photographs. These are some photographs from Richard Avedon of his father and a beekeeper. And I really enjoyed making the framing. And here's Brendan Murray. This is the portrait that I did of them 2 years ago. I'm an elder. It's interesting. I'm 79 years old, and I realized a while ago that I've become an elder in the art world. And I've had a lot of experience. I've done a lot of stuff. And I felt some kind of responsibility to acknowledge it and to use what that might be. I had been archiving my work for about 4 years. I started teaching a class on archiving for older artists. I started teaching a class about personal process. I was writing about my life. It is just, I have really been enjoying being old. I feel very fortunate. I have a body that keeps moving. You know what? I just realized what's going on. Somehow the last time I did this, it took the timing and I wonder if I can stop the timing here. I did it. Okay, it took the timing and it's putting everything on the timing that I had the last time I talked and shifted it. So I'm going to go back to being an elder. One of the things that I've realized is that I don't have the same ambition that I did before. I feel like I've lived a pretty lucky life, actually. I've gotten to do whatever kind of work that is appeared to me in my vision. I've been able to manage. Sometimes things have been better. Sometimes things have been harder. But it's been a real pleasure. And It's just, it's nice to be in a place where I can appreciate what's happened in my life. And actually, I feel like more responsible for other people and to other people than I ever did. Um, okay. 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to stop using square corners. So these are paintings on chrome coat paper with black oil paint. And then they've been mounted onto something called dye bond. And dye bond is a substructure that I could cut exactly to meet the paper and build with it, put it together. This is 4 feet by 4 feet. And I was really proud that I could get such a good edge to that. You know, this is with red dye bond. Ha, it's not stopping where I want. So last year I had a hand operation and I needed to have a material that was soft and easy to work with during my recovery. And I started working with Kleenex tissue. And then I found a Kleenex product called Multicare, which was bigger and stronger. And I started working with dyes and inks and pens, and in a way that I have never done with color. And so it was very exciting for me to be doing that. And I developed a little way to hang it. So it's hanging from a thread. First, they were just hanging loose. And then I was doing the framing is in a cellophane envelope. And it seemed very appropriate to work being done in Kleenex should have a very simple kind of framing for it. One of the interesting things about the Kleenex is it's 2-ply. So if I made a painting, I could actually pull the two pieces apart and have two matching images. So I could make a matching painting, a bigger matching painting. And that's what these are right here. And sometimes I was taking these and building with them on sheet aluminum. So this is a piece that's 4 feet by 4 feet. I like the kind of little structures. I'm fighting this. Okay. At the beginning of the coronavirus, I started hoarding food. Not terribly, but I just had this feeling like it was important to have food because who knows what was going to happen, whether we'd be able to get it. And I started paying attention to the containers they came in. So the one over here on the left was like a milk container that had, I covered it with one of my tissue papers. And I also developed a relationship with a company that made cartons in the Midwest, and they started sending me blank, cut, embossed cartons. They were all white, and I could draw on them, and then I could fold them up and do things with them. And that was exciting. And it was, you know, I didn't know what it was going to turn into. This is what ended up happening most recently with that. I was using sections of the cartons. Sometimes I was putting old paintings on it and building with it. And I started putting mirrors, double-sided mirrors on both in different layers so that there was a sense of illusion. There was another kind of illusionary architecture. And having something on the side here, like a wire or a chain or a rod, so that there was a sense of dimension here. One of the things that happened when I first coronavirus lockdown happened, I started making cards to send to people. People I wanted to know I was thinking of them, that that I cared, and I was doing a lot of that. And I realized that I liked making cards for things for people because the way that it turned out, I knew it was for a specific person and that I would think of them as I was creating it. And it gave me a different kind of freedom. It gave me a different kind of permission, and things happened that wouldn't have happened when I'm just working on my own work. I also decided that I wanted to have more of that in my life. And an idea came up to do a participatory initiative and called Cash by Mail. And I asked people to sign on to a project that would go on in the year, and that they would get 4 paper artworks in the mail, 1 each quarter, and that the group, which was could be as 10 people, would have 4 Zoom meetings where we would talk about art and its meaning and aspects of art. Well, I got this first project has 8 people in it. I sent them their first piece. We had our first meeting. It was very thrilling to me. Everybody in the group was thrilled to be in that meeting. They had important things that they wanted to say. They respected each other. They were curious about each other. And they were, at the end of the meeting, they said, you know what? This meeting isn't long enough. And so the next meeting we're going to have is going to be 90 minutes instead of an hour. And I was very thrilled about it. And I realized how valuable it was. They were talking about what art meant in their life, how they understood that, and how they relate to it. I wrote about what happened that evening, and I realized the next meeting I'm going to ask them to speak about creativity and how they understand that in artwork, and how does creativity show itself in their life. I had sent them each a copy of the meeting, of the outline of what was going to happen, so they knew what was going to happen before. It was no surprise to them. And I'm going to start another group at the beginning of next year. So if anything like this appeals to any of you, contact me and I'll send you more information about this. Oops. And that's it. Thank you.
Terrific.
If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Sydney, we had a question that was asked earlier
Okay.
and it was at the beginning, so I'm not certain that it's applicable, but it says, how did you transition to glass?
Well, it was my working with mirrors in that store that I had. And then I went shopping for antiques to buy in England and ended up with a fancy frame with a convex mirror. And I fell in love with that convex mirror. And so started looking for glass to mirror in the States. And I think that, when I started making those mirrors, that movement of the glass and the way knowing what it did. Hold it, I've got to. Thank you. That factory that there had left tons and cases of glass, in one of the rooms next to my studio. So I had this great assortment of glass, and I felt like I was just someplace in my soul was connected to the glass. And I thought, I don't have blood going through my veins. I have glass going through my veins. And it was thrilling. And I had relationships with a lot of glass dealers in Soho, people who distributed. There were times when the real estate in Soho became so valuable that the people who had their shop for glazers couldn't afford to be there anymore. Distributors couldn't afford to be there anymore. They sold their places, they moved out, and they had to get dumpsters to get glass to throw it away. And they knew me by then. And they said, Sydney, listen, if you want any of this glass on the second floor, we can't afford to send somebody up to the second floor on the stairway to look for a piece of glass. And so I ended up getting all this old glass that from some place that had been there generations, and had a pickup truck, and took 7 pickup trucks full of glass up here. And so I had that to use for many years. And then 2 years ago, I decided I didn't want that glass anymore. And I ended up donating 3,000 square feet of glass to Urban Glass. So they brought up a big truck and carted stuff away. And I was very happy that it was going on to other people to use.
Thank you. We have another question, and they want to know, what do you do in your spare time?
I have a family. I'm very fortunate that 2 of my sons live close. I swim every day, just about. I love swimming. And I was swimming all summer at this big pool that somebody had. I didn't know them really, but I had been invited there. And then I called them up. I said, listen, can I use your pool early in the morning? And I'm an artist, and I'll trade you a small painting for access. And they loved the idea. And when they finally closed it up, my gym opened. And so I'm swimming there. And in this whole pool room where there are 6 lanes, 3 people can swim. We get a double lane for swimming, and they have a hot and cold tub. And one person, you can be in that if you're not swimming, 1 person in that. And so I'm very happy to be doing that again. I'm interested in French. I speak French. I'm looking at right now actually to find somebody and some people in France to speak with. And we garden. We have a nice garden, and we grow food, and my wife grows a lot of flowers.
Another question, are you self-taught, or did you take any art classes?
Well, I took art classes when I was very young at the Detroit Institute of Art. I took some classes in college, but pretty much I'm self-taught. What I have always found is that there's some real value to not knowing the rules. That if I make mistakes, like some of the things that I make are just these fabulous mistakes that if I'd known what to do, I'd have never done it. But the mistakes are more interesting than anything that I thought I was going to do, and it leads me to another place, like when I overcooked the glass and got 3-dimensional. I feel very grateful, and that I've had this creative vision. I often see images of things being made, or actually I have movies go through my mind of how it's going to happen, what's going to happen, and what's the result. And I just watch these movies. I also, I meditate an hour every day. I often go with wonderful ideas during that period. And I'm very attentive to my intuition and my intuitive thoughts. So oftentimes at the studio, I'm working, and either something happens unexpected, or I have an idea, and I'll have a bolt of electricity shoot up my spine. And if that happens, I say, oh, this is important. Figure out how to do this, pay attention to it, see where this leads. This is still going, I feel like I'm thrilled that I can be this age and still have that kind of thing going on, because I feel like it keeps my life energetic and it keeps me young.
Very good. You know, our AACG audience, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. You don't have to use the chat box. So I think
I have a question.
Sure.
On your portraits of Murray and Brenda, or I think those were the names. The first one obviously was a sketch. Was the later one a photo that you worked on?
I was, I started working with photographers' images, and then I said, oh, I can take photographs. And so I started taking people's photographs, and I was using their image that I had taken, done some photoshopping to make it more appropriate for what I wanted to do, and ended up making the final piece over a photographic print.
How do you melt your glass?
How do I melt it?
Yes.
I was making electric kilns, and I don't know if the Maurice Heaton, if you know that name. Maurice Heaton was a glass bender, and he came from an English family that had been melting glass for 4 generations. And when I wanted to learn how to bend glass, I went to the American Craft Museum. I said, who can I go to see that would help me, teach me? So they gave me his name. He had a studio in Westchester, and I spent an afternoon with him, and he told me how to make electric kiln. It was very simple, and I didn't have a superstructure around it. They were just built up. The top itself had to have some kind of rods going through the bricks, and I needed to create some kind of a hinge so I could lift it up and let the heat go out when I needed to, when I wanted to stop something, some movement. But they were the element. It was some simple stuff. It was easy to make elements on a rod and an electric drill, and I kept playing with it. Sometimes I seemed to do what I wanted. Sometimes I had to reconfigure the kiln to get closer to what it was I wanted to make at that period.
Well, Sydney, I want to thank you so very much for your time today. This was just educational, entertaining, interesting, and I hope you have another 20 years or more of doing art. So
thank all of you. It was fun to have this opportunity to share this with you, and everybody be well, be safe.
thank you, and thank
You too.
Heler and to Heler Gallery too.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye.